Hey everyone, we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. As ever, Dr. Erin here with you.
Dr. Kristen on this end.
And we are moving on to our next television show we would like to discuss. And we're starting with Hulu's latest venture into historical feminism, Mrs. America. And the show covers, if you don't know, the attempt to pass and adopt the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution, starting in the early 1970s. So the show starts in episode 1 in 1971. So episode 1 is about Phyllis Schlafly, whom, if you don't know who she is, I would ask Google. But she is, in this instance, the person who becomes the main opposition for the ERA. And this episode shows us the evolution of how she gets there. She's a fascinating human, I think, even if problematic. And they show you through this how she is a very smart woman who had high ambitions for how she was going to impact the world, and had all these limitations placed on her by her gender that she fascinatingly does not see, even when she's confronted with them. And she has learned all these different ways to get what she wants done and get her voice heard, which we see in this episode as well. And at the end of the episode, we come in to introduce, I think, the other characters and the other historical figures that are part of this movement. And we see March 1972, the passing of the Equal Rights Amendment in the Senate, and we start to briefly get introduced to some of the women we're going to be following, like Betty Friedan, Shirley Chisholm, Gloria Steinem, Bella Abzug, on the other side of the equal rights table, if you will. So, yeah, some interesting things happened in this episode. But I think it would be helpful, Dr. Kristen, if you would explain where we are in the world of feminism in 1971 for people that might not know of the multiple waves and what it was like during these times.
During those times?
During those times.
So it kind of in the aughts, we started coming up with this model of waves of feminism. So this isn't like Betty Friedan was walking around saying, I'm the captain of second wave feminism.
I'm a second wave feminist, yeah.
So, and to my knowledge, she actually quite didn't like the term. I think I was like colloquially told that. But what we understand now is that the very first wave of feminism was the Suffragettes, which in the United States was an agitating movement from about 1865 to 1920, and around the world at different eras. This is the 1920 is the anniversary of the passage and ratification of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, white women, the right to vote in the United States. Mm-hmm. And so all of that, which was a very complicated group of women from a whole lot of perspectives. There was women that, physically gave their bodies over to violence to fight for this. There were others that felt much more of a nonviolence approach. The name you probably know the most is Susan B. Anthony. She was actually not alive when the passage, when the bill was eventually ratified, because it took so damn long to get it done. But her grave is still kind of the one. She's often seen as the mother of feminism in the United States because she was the figurehead of the movement that said that women have every right to be as educated as men and therefore have every right to vote. Mm-hmm. And that voting is the passageway into citizenship. And she was the voice at Seneca Falls, which is the historic conference in Seneca Falls, New York, where the movement, the agitation kind of first started. So then we have, so that's the 1920s, and then the Depression hits, and then World War II happens, and what it means to be an American woman, it shifts a lot. And I've read some high speculation that if women had been allowed culturally to stay at work after World War II, this would have looked a lot different. But because they weren't, is why we kind of got second wave feminism.
Right.
Second wave feminism starts with the introduction. Pretty much the way we mark it is the agitation for the birth control pill, Roe versus Wade, and the Equal Rights Amendment. Kind of those three: abortion, reproductive freedom, and reproductive autonomy, and the Equal Rights Amendment are kind of bucketed into second wave feminism. When you hear people speak very ill of feminism, they use the phrase feminazis, or they talk about burning your bra, or they kind of say these very intense, I'm not a feminist. Mm-hmm. I will bet you all the money in my bank account that people are reacting to second wave feminist behavior. Yeah. This is the movement where there was a whole lot of conversations about what femininity meant. And could you be a woman? Do you have to shave your armpits? Do you have to wear a bra? Do you have to wear a girdle? Like kind of that kind of stuff. And people still react very strongly. Women, men, non-binary folk alike react very strongly to second wave feminism.
And there were a lot of voices that were like presented themselves as the arbiters of what it was.
Correct. And what I was, so there's a lot of fatal flaws of second wave feminism. Like, they got some stuff done, but they were bulldogs in they were bulldozers, and they just made things happen. And in the history of social movements, there's often a chapter of a social movement like this where it's just a wrecking ball.
Yeah.
And they were the wrecking balls of equality in a certain way. But their feminism was not intersectional. Gloria Steinem herself has said that. She did not understand women of color, trans women, anybody on the queer spectrum. She didn't get how the way she talked about feminism and the way she enacted it was exclusionary. She didn't understand. And that was actually quite a long journey for her to understand that. And then we kind of get third wave feminism, which is just as a FYI, like the 90s and the aughts. And this conversation was a whole lot more about how feminists could still wear lipstick and could still, like, that it really started to emerge into the point of feminism is that everyone gets their own choices. So now a lot of gender scholars, gender studies is a fraught place, folks. It's a fraught place with a lot of emotions. But a lot of the folks that I follow and kind of truck with talk about that we're in the fourth wave, and I jokingly refer to the fourth wave as logic, which is just that humans are humans, and gender is a social construct, and we just kind of all are figuring this out together. So that's where we are. But the second wave is angry in its core. Like that is their motivation. So I guarantee you we're going to see that throughout this process. They also very much assumed that the Equal Rights Amendment was not going to be a fight. They knew that Roe was a fight. Yeah. They thought the ERA wasn't. And when it turned into a fight, they got real angry real fast at Phyllis.
And that's what fascinates me about just the little bit of insight that we get into this is the kind of they whet our appetites at the end of the episode by showing how dismissive, how secure they felt, the people fighting for the Equal Rights Amendment, how secure they felt in being able to pass it without any problems, and then how dismissive they were of anybody that didn't agree with them.
And they didn't recognize any of the flaws. They didn't recognize this is a classic example of not having people at the table that disagree with you. Yeah. Like they didn't listen to anybody who didn't 100% agree with them, very clearly. And what's really interesting in this particular episode, a couple things. One, all of the things that Phyllis lists as protections for women under the Constitution don't actually explicitly protect women the way that she thinks they do. And so there is still actually no explicit constitutional protection for women as a protected class.
Nope.
Which makes it very hard to argue for things like domestic violence funding and things like that. So if you don't know anything about the ERA at all and you're watching it, she sounds real convincing. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have all of her facts, which is totally fair. But the emotions around the people that she's talking to are very real. Yeah. And the people in charge of the ERA, to my knowledge and every historical account I've ever read, did not take any of those fears into account. When, like, you know, they very much decided, this is similar to me in how Western women feel about about how white women feel about women wearing headscarves. Yeah. Like, I'm going to tell you what freedom looks like for you. And that's very much, especially what Betty Friedan was doing for the housewives of America. Like, oh, by the way, you're a slave, and I'm going to tell you you're a slave. And not remembering that like a lot of people didn't feel like slaves.
Yeah.
And this is what they wanted. And if you want to argue that they wanted it because of cultural conditioning, fine, but that's a separate conversation to their emotions and their lives.
And you're not going to dismantle a mindset by
publishing a book and being a bitch. By
calling people that, by just telling, like, it's a lot of work to dismantle the mindset of the patriarchy. And to dismiss the fact that some women were happy, and wanted to stay that way and didn't want to challenge, like, that's how you're not going to bring people into the movement by saying you're wrong and you're stupid and you don't understand what's happening to you.
Yeah, and it is a very valid fear that they would take away alimony. Like, alimony is still a massive deal.
Yeah.
And because we have the system is rigged to allow men to make more money. Mm-hmm. So alimony is a massive deal. Child support is a massive deal. The draft no longer is, thank God, but like if they reinstated it, that would be a really big deal.
Yeah.
So it's that they just got very intellectual. Like, I don't know the history of the phrase East Coast elites. I don't, but my guess is it came around right around now. Like,
yeah, I don't know. That's interesting.
I don't know, but like this was a really, not just the ERA, but a lot of stuff happening in the 70s.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about, we don't need people from New York telling us how to think. And some of that's very anti-Semitic, because when they say that kind of thing, they usually mean Jews. But I feel like it probably kind of gained cultural, and I could be wrong. If you know that it was around since like the 1860s, please let us know. But I feel like in all the pop culture I consume, I hear it more and more and more in stuff in the 70s.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to see if we can find the etymology of that phrase.
Yeah.
But I think another thing that was fascinating about how complicated these women's relationships were with their femininity and with any sort of equity or equality was the way that Phyllis projected herself and presented herself as just a working housewife.
Yes, when she didn't do anything.
When she didn't do anything around the house. She had her sister-in-law, her husband's wife, who is unmarried.
And we find out very upset about that.
And very upset about it. Real thoughts and feelings and emotions. And that get abused and thrown under the bus by Phyllis at her meeting, which was horrible. But she has a black housemaid that does the cooking and the cleaning and the laundry.
Multiple, it looks like, actually, too. So
yeah. And her sister-in-law, who does not have the burden of a husband or children, does a lot of the unpaid labor, it looks like, as well, and child minding. So yeah, I was just watching it and I'm like, but and Phyllis, I hate to interrupt, but
yeah, she brings up the same, like, Beyonce has the same number of hours in the day as you do. Beyonce does not, because Beyonce outsources 20 of her hours to other people.
Yeah.
Phyllis was outsourcing 20 of her hours.
Yeah, she was outsourcing a lot of it so that she could pursue her interests, which is fine, and her every right to do so.
But let's not, like, if I, a childless woman, tried to say that, like, I really can speak for being a domestic housewife, I cannot.
No.
I cannot. I don't do the unpaid labor around my house.
Yeah. That is not the case.
It would be a lie.
Yeah. So complicating the narrative, I hope the show continues to do that. And yeah, the power of a good old newsletter, we're going to find out.
Oh my gosh. Things that, yeah. I mean, I think it's a really strong reminder, the number of times, and the show wants you to pick up on this because the editing choices were clear. When she says, I've never been discriminated against, that, like, you are shown all the ways she's discriminated against, that James Marsden's creepy character, puts his hand on her shoulder just a little too long, and that her husband never thought she was going to win the election. And
even when she gets in that meeting with Barry Goldwater, they ask her to take the notes, like
all these kind of things. And that is, if many of the feminists were in the room, they'd point all those things out.
Yeah.
But we are not programmed as human beings to assume our own oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Very often. we normalize a lot of things subconsciously as soon as we can for comfort.
Yeah.
So unless you agitate in your own self, or somebody points things out for you, it's often very difficult to recognize your own oppression. And that's like, Dr. Aaron and I use the phrase all the time, what is seen cannot be unseen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like, she's never seen it, so it's not reality for her. But like, oh, is it reality for us?
Yeah. And she sees it in a way that she realizes the only way she's going to get the power and influence that she wants is by taking on the Equal Rights Amendment.
Yeah.
Like, she sees that. I mean, she sees that she gets dismissed. And you see that she's uncomfortable by James Marsden's inappropriate behavior. And so I think it's fascinating that they showed us that she saw that. And you see at the scene towards the end of the episode when she's at the dining room table with her husband, and the people who were supposed to support her run for office, and she's like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I need to stay at home with my kids, which is laughable. Not laughable. She does have a relationship with her children, but she says the things to her husband that he needs to hear. And then she says, by the way, my mother is moving in with us.
Which, that is the ultimate, like, rich person's weapon. You say it in front of other people, it is now true.
It is now true. Yeah.
Because wasps don't take things back.
Yeah. So I was really intrigued to see the way that she learned her power, and continues to, I think, throughout her whole life. They showed us, and still not quite see it. I was like, but you do see it, but she doesn't see it. And I'm just like,
fascinating.
Phyllis,
come on, girl.
Come on, work with us, Phyllis, work with us. But then we
all actually want the same thing.
Yeah. We are products of the logic wave of feminism. So
yeah, we are products of the logic wave. Yeah.
So just be warned, folks, you're going to be seeing this show through our lens. So if you have a different lens of feminism, we'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. But yeah, we're looking back at this second wave like
pals. I mean, like, friends. Literally, I have a whole chapter of my PhD critiquing second wave feminism.
That is literally my job.
Literally my job for a little while. So, I mean, I critique third wave, fourth wave, and first wave too. Don't worry, nobody was out of the critique.
Nobody was spared.
Nobody was spared. I had feelings. But I think that's all I got, though, for this one. My feelings can pause for episode 2, which is going to be about Gloria Steinem.
Yeah, I'm excited that they're doing thematic episodes for this one and focusing on the women. And it'll be interesting to delve a little bit more into Gloria Steinem on this one, and frickin' Rose Byrne, who is depressingly good at acting.
She's upsettingly perfect. All of them in this are. Cate Blanchett. Who else have we seen? Cate Blanchett is upsettingly wonderful.
Martindale.
We need to have a conversation. Margot Martindale, Queen Margot. We need to have a conversation about British women's ability to play American women.
I know, because I remember seeing somebody that was like upset that they had cast Rose Byrne and Cate Blanchett. But like Rose Byrne legit looks like Gloria Steinem.
She does. I don't know who else. And Cate Blanchett looks a little bit like Phyllis too. There are other actresses, but like Rose Byrne is a dead ringer. So
yeah, I'm not one of those people that's like, it has to be a white woman. Like, it has to be an American woman to play an American feminist.
I do think it changes the story though. And so I was one of the people that was a little bit frustrated when there was not frustrated, but I noticed that David Oyelowo played MLK, who was not an American, who was not African American. So it changes the tenor sometimes. Yeah. And so I am paying attention to it. I'm not necessarily bothered by it, but I am paying attention to it.
Yes, same. Yeah. And there are times where where that casting, I'm not sure. It's a complicated thing. I'm not sure how I fall on it. I think race changes things sometimes.
For good or for ill or will, like our logic might be skewed.
Yeah.
But fascinating.
It's fascinating. We'll learn more about these women as we go. Please join us. And we will see you next week for episode 2, Gloria.